the game that kicked off the 2025 college football season was a banger, both in how it turned out and also it being two ranked teams week 0. You don't often get that. Kansas State versus Iowa State. Iowa State pulled out a 3-point win over in Ireland. It was a rainy game. It was a gross game. Ball control was an issue. Multiple fumbles on both sides. Defense was very stout, especially in the front sevens, in my opinion. Run defense on both sides were very strong, especially Kansas State's. Iowa State couldn't run the ball until the fourth quarter, and then Carson Hansen kind of started. He was running hard all game, but after kind of getting a rest in the third quarter, came back and tore it up in the fourth quarter. Rocco Becht was pretty good. I thought Avery Johnson played pretty well. But overall, it was a good intro to the college football season. Thoughts on the game, boys?
I thought the game was I felt like the game was clear how it was going to go from the first drive. Iowa State comes out with Rocco Becht, who was a very good quarterback last year, and runs the ball 4 straight plays, throws an incompletion. They punt. Kansas State muffs it, and Iowa State picks it back up. It was just like, you were like, oh, it's going to be one of those games. It's going to be hard to work through the air because of the conditions, and it's going to be hard to, like, the little details are going to be very important because muffing a punt in dry weather is not easy, but like, a fundamental, but in the wet weather, it gets so much more complicated. And so there was a lot of that, but it was an awesome game. I was a little sad, like all the people who were like, of course we get a bum Big 12, like ugly game to start the season. I was like, I personally loved it. I do not fault the teams. I don't think any of the teams I hold them or view them as worse because turnovers were an issue because it was very wet and it was the first game of the season. Like, sure, there's some rust to knock off. So I was a little sad to see everyone on Twitter like immediately jumping on the Big 12 and saying that if the SEC was in this game, like it'd be so much better. And I'm like, do you remember when Georgia played Ole Miss in the bad weather? Like weather can screw you up. It can change how you play the game. It can make the fundamentals not fundamental. So I was a little sad to see fans jump on the Big 12 because I thought it was a fantastic game between two very good teams. And I really liked JP watching Rocco Becht I didn't really watch him much last year. I knew Iowa State was good. I knew they had a good record. I knew they were putting up good stats, but I didn't watch Rocco Becht. And getting to watch him yesterday, it was pretty enjoyable to watch him. And also not Avery Williams, but Avery Johnson, because I've made that mistake a couple times now, jokingly. Also very good. There were just a couple times the passing offense wasn't great for most of the game, but a couple times it clicked and it was like that was really pretty to watch.
Well, they got rolling as soon as it stopped pouring.
Yeah.
The second half, both the quarterbacks started hitting some big throws. I think the rain had to do it, but I think they schemed up some big throws. People got open downfield. Jace Brown especially really popped for me from Kansas State. I know you tossed him out in the preview, but he's very, very quick, runs great routes, is a huge weapon for Kansas State.
He just looks like a receiver, too.
Yeah, he really does. He looks the part. He plays the part. He was a huge piece. Iowa State-wise, it reminds me of – so they had their two really good wide receivers last year, but it seems like they're kind of back to a more stereotypical Iowa State offense in terms of really relying on the tight ends in the passing game, targeting them a ton over the middle, just letting them win with their big frames. So, I feel like last year's Iowa State offense was a little more out of the norm, and this seemed more kind of physical. Yeah, back to getting the tight ends involved in the passing. Not that they weren't involved last year, but they had two wide receivers go in the second round. That's not going to be the norm for Iowa State at all. So, thoughts, JP? We've not gone yours yet.
Yeah, no, it was fun. It was, like you said, Sanders, I completely agree. Like, even if it was South Carolina and, Florida for whatever reason, and it was two dynamic quarterbacks on Lenore Sellers and DJ Lagway, with how much it was raining, it would not have mattered. It would have been a slugfest. It would have been on the ground and pound, just like how Iowa State and Kansas State had to play.
There would have been a half a dozen fumbles, maybe not all recovered by the defense, but
Absolutely.
the ball would have been on the ground.
There were 4 fumbles lost in this game, so a ton there. I thought the game was lost for Kansas State basically right off the bat with muffing the punt, and then Dylan Edwards is hurt immediately.
Yeah,
and
it's a big
in
loss.
A game where, as we saw as the game can progress, that if you can get one-on-one with one guy and beat him, you will win. When you lose your guy who is excellent at that in Dylan Edwards, I think it made Kansas State immediately one-dimensional, which was we're going to target Jace Brown or we're going to run with Avery Johnson. I guess that's two-dimensional, but that were their only two weapons, and they were not going to find success on the ground, just handing it off to the tailback, and they didn't throughout that entire game. They really didn't. There was not really. Joe Jackson had 51 rushing yards, but nothing was dynamic on that front. That losing Dylan Edwards, I thought, costed Kansas State the game immediately. But for the game to start out that way, I thought it was kind of a cinema first quarter of muffing the first punt, and then Iowa State's in there and they continue to run the ball, and then Rocco Beck throws a pitch and it hits his teammate in the helmet, and Kansas State recovers. Then there's 3 straight 3-and-outs, and then Iowa State comes out. It stops raining for a second, and Rocco Beck throws 3 straight passes, touchdown. At that point, I thought it was over in my mind. And this is a guy who picked Kansas State. I picked Kansas State to win the Big 12 as well. I was like, okay, well, we're in a spot where it's either going to have to be Avery Johnson the entire game, and we have never seen that, really. He's never really taken over a game entirely, and I didn't expect it to happen again there. What disappointed me was I didn't see, even weather aside, I didn't see a step up from Avery Johnson.
So
you got him tripped up now.
I'm not going to make the mistake again. We can put that behind us. I'm not going to do that to y'all anymore.
I expected him to be more disciplined. I expected him to value the football a little bit more. I expected him to make a few bigger plays. The biggest thing for him last year, they lost a game because he had an intentional grounding in his own end zone for a safety. He had an intentional grounding in this game that cost them a ton of field position. The fourth quarter was electric, though. They scored 24 points in the fourth quarter after scoring 21 the entire game. So that was really fun to see.
We got our first bad beat betting-wise of the season because we thought the over cashed for a split second, and then his forearm was down on the half-yard line.
Yep,
so.
That was a rough one. And then, obviously, I bet Kansas State -3. That was my first bet of the year, and that one, of course, didn't hit. But I think Rocco Beck showed, even in a game where he completes only half of his passes, showed what I wanted to see out of him. I saw the step up from him immediately. It was just okay, he's going to consistently be good. He's leading his team. You lose your 2 receivers in Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. It doesn't matter. We're going to go out there. We're going to beat the favorites to win the Big 12 on a neutral field, and we had a week less to prepare for this game. We're the doubted team, and then he led them to victory. He's still probably going to play another season after this, but I think what he showed in that game, he's immediately already going to be on my big board for the next year's draft.
Sure.
I because of his talent. The biggest thing for him right now is, and Josh Pate touched on this as a Cyclone fan, is I want to see, does he have another step? Because he's been consistently good, but at some point you're going to reach your potential and you can't improve anymore. And I think the only question there for Rocco is, has he reached that already? Is he already at the best he'll ever be? And I hope not, because the kid can play ball.
He definitely can. I feel like watching the game, the starkest contract to me between the 2 quarterbacks is I think Rocco Becht is very smart and intelligent QB, and sometimes talking about the intentional grounding, stuff like that, the game speeds up a little bit on Avery Johnson. He maybe scrambles when he shouldn't, something like that, which I know his legs are great. That's a real weapon for him. But that's just they're polar opposites in that regard. And then I tried to look up just now any news on Dylan Edwards, but it's college football. So he was seen in a boot in the Dublin airport today. Not great, but also they just put everyone in a boot. He could have a stub toe and he's walking around in a boot, so you just don't really know.
We had a baseball player. I mean, it's college sports, so that's my comparison. We had a baseball player who one game of the weekend he was wearing a boot, and then he played the next day. It's just
you just don't really know.
No idea.
So I hope he gets back healthy. He's supposed to be a key piece of that offense. And people getting mad at him for not being hurt and just quitting that's so stupid. I've seen that narrative a lot on Twitter and stuff, is that he just got upset he muffed the punt.
Yeah.
And walked off the field and decided he wasn't going to play anymore. That's ridiculous.
I was just going to point out real quick for the Kansas State thing, because as far as impact goes, this is a big deal in my opinion that it was a conference matchup to start the season. However, it doesn't hurt Kansas State too much. We've talked about this before, but I want to reiterate, because Kansas State plays 10 conference games, this loss doesn't necessarily end up hurting them. So if they end up getting to 8 conference wins, the loss isn't going to hurt them in a tiebreaker. It actually, I guess, helped them situationally. So
Sure.
because they play that extra conference game, it's them and Arizona were the 2 that we found.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas State might not, or potentially won't be punished if they have a good season from here on.
And I don't expect Arizona to be up there
No,
with
me
8
neither.
conference wins at 8-2. But it is the Big 12. I guess you never know.
Yeah, Kansas State, they can lose 2 conference games and will more than likely reach the Big 12 title game. In fact, there's routes where they could lose 3 conference games and still reach the Big 12 title game. That's a lot less likely, but 2 losses and they're still fine. And the thing is, going forward throughout the rest of the season, like Iowa State, realistically, outside of the Utah game, was their toughest game. They'll play at Utah late in the season, but other than that, they're probably going to be favored in almost every other game this season unless Baylor were to come on very early. And so Finn, I completely disagree. I think week 0 showed that it was week 0. The team wasn't ready. They lost their best player, one of their best weapons at least, immediately to start the game, and they didn't really have the game plan to counter that. And they lost by 3 points. This is not a... If that's like the point, then I think... Oh, you just... And that was another point I'm going to make. This is the point you just have now made in the chat. The turf was very sloppy. It was complete... It was a rock fight. It was a... The conditions were not something that Kansas State is going to play in the rest of the year. They play on a turf field at home, so they don't have to deal with these kind of sloppy conditions. I think they're still well in line to reach the Big 12 title game. If they're so bad,
Iowa State's also not
then
very
Iowa
good.
State is not good, and then what do we even know about the Big 12 going forward? So I have no worries about Kansas State in the rest of the season as my Big 12 title pick. I think they're going to continue to play on and play well this year. The only concern, I think, Dylan Edwards needs to be on the team for them to win the Big 12, and there's definitely some concern there going forward. But they lost. Someone has to lose in week 0. Someone has to lose in week 1, and I just think the panic is going to be too much. If you're panicking already about this game, I'm concerned about how you're going to feel after LSU Clemson.
Yeah.
How you're going to feel after...
I mean, we already know Clemson fans will be calling for Dabo to be fired. So
Ohio State, Texas. There's big games this coming. How are you going to feel about Notre Dame, Miami? Is one of those teams just going to go 6-6 if they lose that week 1 game? Let's not overreact. Way too early on. I think Kansas State's going to be fine. The only thing that, for me, is troubling is that if you look historically,
It's not good to lose the week 0 game.
the team that loses in Ireland averages 3 wins a season.
that was
But
Florida State.
Those teams were Florida State, which was completely, that was insane.
Unprecedented. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
very unprecedented.
And Northwestern.
Northwestern is lost there. They're, of course, terrible. And then I think it was Navy or it was Army. One of the armed forces lost against Notre Dame
Okay.
in that game. And, they historically have not been great at football either. So
Sure.
I think this is probably still the best team out of those teams that have lost. Of course, that's hindsight with Florida State there, but
So was Florida State a higher ranked team than Kansas State going
Yes,
into
Florida
the game?
State
Yeah.
was number 10, I believe.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool. I'm not too worried about it either. If Kansas State only wins 3 games,
2, because Florida State won 2 last year.
2-10.
but if the average is 3,
the average, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'll do, but I'll do something, I guess.
Good bet. Good bet.